Everyone, welcome to the third video of the tutorial. So in the first two we looked into how the RStudio graphical user interface looks like, and the second one we looked into the basic coding syntaxes and R. Today in this video we are going to try and understand the basic concepts of if, then and else. So in coding, and when we are trying to do any analysis, a very important part of the coding goes on like conditions and conditional actions and conditional functions. So if, then and else is something that is actually not new in R. It's something we do in Excel, we do in all languages. So we're going to introduce this if, then else and if, then else coding in R today in this video. So the target would be to introduce if, then and else. Now, in order to understand how the logic of if, then and else work, let's actually look at a different flowchart. So here, as you can see, this is a simple flowchart where we start with an if condition. So the condition is where we ask whether something is greater than something, something is less than something, something has some certain values or not, something matches certain patterns or not, and then there is two outcomes. So whether the condition is true or false. If the condition is true, we have a code for the true side of the condition, and if the condition is false, then we have a code for the false side of the condition. That's simply put is the if then and else logic behind coding. So a simple example could be, say, right now the governments across the world are giving out COVID vaccinations, right? So in terms of COVID vaccinations, one of the first things is like the people who are older than 70 are being prioritized, at least in Singapore. So what's going to happen is, suppose someone's age is 65. So the condition would check whether that age is greater than 70 or not. If since someone's age is 65, then the condition is false. So the false result could be like, someone like asked to wait until like 70 plus people are vaccinated. So if someone's age is 75, it would be the condition is true and they will be vaccinated. So let's actually create this logic here in R. So let's first create an age vector which has ages of some people. So it has ages of someone who's 78, then someone who's 75, then someone who's 65, then someone who's 69, and someone who's 64. And now, and this age variable, so we would want to know which of these people are qualified for vaccination and which of the people we will tell to wait for the vaccination. So simply put, it starts in a very simple way. If the if, then and else has a function in R which is if else, and then we start with a condition which is if age is greater than or equal to 70. And then the next part is if the condition is yes or true. So if someone is aged 70 or more, that person would be given the message that qualified for vaccination. And then the next part is the false part. So if the person is not age 70 or greater, then he will get a message called you have to wait your turn. Wait your turn. Now, if I run this code now, so the first person gets a message of qualified for vaccination, the second person qualified for vaccination, the third person you have to wait your turn, the fourth person you have to wait your turn, and the fifth person you have to wait your turn. Which goes well with the data we have, because the first two persons were greater than 70, the other three were less than 70. So this is simply how if, then and else functions work in R. Now let's look at a few other usage of if, then and else. So suppose I have a series of numbers from 1 to 100, and now I want to divide them into, like, say, anything below 50 or below would be termed as a small number, would be labeled small, and anything which is 51 and above would be termed as big, labeled big. So let's create a variable which is, say, 1 to 100. So let's call this variable 1 to 100. And here, let's create this variable by creating a vector with values 1 to 100. Now, one way we can do is go like this, 1, 2, 3, but then, I mean, why even code if you have to write so much, right? So there is actually a way to generate a sequence like this. The way to generate it using a function called sequence. Now what sequence does is it starts with, first of all, a simple syntax called from. So where do you want the sequence to start from? So I want to start it from 1, and then it follows by something called 2. Where do I want the sequence to end in? And finally, it wants an information which is by, that is, so this sequence will start from 1 and will end in 100, and by how many steps it will go, or like, like what's the value of each step. So if I want a consecutive list of numbers, so from 1 to 100, then I can just give it by 1. In that case, when I run, so if I see 1 to 100, you'll see that in the right hand side it's a sequence 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. So if I print the 1 to 100 variable in my console, I can see that there are 100 numbers from 1 to 100 in a sequence. Now, say I want to create a label, and in that label, any value which is 50 or less will be termed as small, and any label which is 51 or more will be termed as big. The way to do that is, let's call it label1, a variable where we're going to store the labels. And again, we will bring out the if else. So in if else, we start with, first of all, we say that we take in the condition of 1 to 100, and if 1 to 100 is less than or equal to 50, then we will term it as small, or else it will turn it as big. So anything greater than greater than 50, that is 51 and above, will be termed as big. So when we run that, you'll see that we have created something called label1, where there were small, we can see, and its character. If you print label1, you'll see that we have like 50 values which are small and 50 values which are big. Now, a very useful code in R, which kind of helps when you're looking at a character variable with 3 or 4 values repeated many times, is the table code. So when I pressed run this function table and put in label 1 variable inside, here I have 50 bigs and 50 smalls. A very nifty way of doing a frequency calculation. Now, moving on, suppose we take a bigger challenge. Suppose we want to create a sequence which starts from 1, ends in 100, but which jumps by 7. So let's call it jump 7 variable, and the way to create that sequence again would be sequence. And now I'm going to show you a shortcut. So here, instead of always writing from, to, and by, if we follow this series of the first number is from, the second number is to, and the third number is by, we can just write to R like this, that the starting number would be from, which is 1, and then the ending number would be 100, which is 2, and the last number would be 7, the jumping number. So it would be 1, 8, 15, just like that. So when I run this, I have jump 7 variable created, which is 15 numbers. So if I print jump 7 here, yes, exactly the way I want it to be, 7, 7, 7. So every time there is a 7 jump. Now, let's divide this variable into 3 parts. Anything which is less than 33 would be termed as tiny. Anything which is 34 to 67 would be termed as medium, and anything above 67 would be termed as large. So in order to do that, and let's store this value in something called a label2. So in label2, we create the label2 variable, and then again we use the if else command. Now we start with jump 7, our variable, and then we check if jump 7 is less than or equal to 33. If it is, then the label we want it to have is tiny. Now comes this complication. But so after tiny, the next output is if the jump 7 value is not 33. Now we want to create 3 parts here, right? Anything less than or equal to 33 is tiny. Anything from 34 to 67 is medium, and anything above 67 is actually large. How can we do that? We just have one option here. So what we do is something called nested functions, where I introduce another if else function within this if else function. So if you write if else here, and then we write again if jump 7 is less than or equal to 67, then it's medium, or else it's large. So what's going to happen here is, first of all, we look into any values in GEM7 which is less than or equal to 33, and all of them are labeled as tiny. Now after that, we're going to look at values of GEM7 which are greater than 33 but less than or equal to 67, and they'll be termed as large, medium. And then anything else, which is anything other than so 68 and above, are basically termed as large. So when I run this code and look at label 2, so we have tinies, we have mediums, and we have large. Now if I want to see the distribution, we can just run the table code and press in label 2, and there you go, 5 large, 5 medium, and 5 tiny. Simply, this is a simple introduction to if then and else statement in R. I hope you find it useful. The next video, we will look into data frames and how to index data frames, and then we'll move towards how to use for loops. So if you have any comments or questions, feel free to write in the comment section. Thank you all for listening.